All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Energy Market Update. A special welcome to any of our channel partners able to make it today. We did see prices settle off a little bit week to week after the run up from the heat wave that we saw. But before we get into that, that's me, John Vieira, on the left. We got our trusty legal disclaimer on the right, and today's agenda, as usual, natural gas fundamentals, market news, followed by weather, and then market data. So taking a look at natural gas fundamentals, these estimates, again, more to the low side, double digits kind of in that mid pack, not closer to 90 or 100. So we had estimates at 54 to 57, and we still came below that with only an injection of 52. So right now, we are still well above the 5-year average at 528 above, but we're a lot lower than we were just a few weeks ago. We were in the high 600s, then mid, low 600s, and we keep ticking on down. And this is that slow story that we're concerned about as we get into the fall and winter, especially for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic markets. So just taking a look at that as a picture, taking a look at the green arrow, we can see the blue line getting a lot closer to the gray shaded area. So that's for the min max, with the gray line being that 5-year average. So getting a lot closer. We start getting into the gray area or even moving down significantly in there, expecting prices to move up. Especially with the chance of hot summer followed by cold winter. We've already had a hot spring and hot start to summer so far, and could be in for our first cold winter in quite a while. And we see that the estimates for this week, the next report coming out, still very low, 34 to 54. So building on this story, this is one of the biggest stories keeping a lid on prices right now with a lot of the bullish stories that are out there. This disappears, we could be in a very different place very quickly. And not much has changed. Picture looks pretty much the same, just kind of that more downward kink on the orange line as it gets closer to the red on the update, showing that production has really kind of started coming off since the beginning of 2024. So less production going on, while on the other hand, and that gray box to the right is an extension of the graphic showing that, continuing to increase those exports, maxing out molecules that we can send abroad. And that is supposed to continue over the next several years with probably doubling the capacity. So sending out a lot more while at the same time we don't have production forecasted to increase much. So net less supply for the US, less supply putting upward pressure on prices. And again, still going to the same points around the world, the national imbalancing point for the UK, the title transfer facility for the EU, and the JKM Japan Korean marker. And the spread has been widening going to Asia, so we might be seeing some more gas go there as well. Especially for any channel partners on the call, this is the updated graphic, and what you're going to notice is the arrows to the left, the red and black, they grew a lot bigger than from where the May forecast was. So even more risk in the short term. It was already there for the long term, but this moved up here, just showing that these bullish stories are starting to get some teeth and could be coming sooner than later. So make sure our clients are aware and apply this to regional graphs. Taking a look at the market news, election cycles are upcoming. That's going to be highlighted by the debate going on tonight. For internal team on the call, we have seen this story, but it continues to develop and is one of the big important things of how nuclear is actually going to come into the mix, or if it will at all. So after all these announcements we've been talking over the past couple months of nuclear starting to get some support and really become a major talking point as we move into the election, it does seem, the question is this window dressing and a band-aid for a lot of the green and renewable being well behind schedule, all the problems with solar, the solar waivers, the supply chain through China, with the offshore wind projects well behind schedule and costing a whole lot more than we're expected. Can nuclear be that silver bullet? So one of the things with clients is making sure to read past the headlines. It'll be interesting to see if this is talked about tonight. One thing to notice is expected that this was the advanced bill that was passed that's going to support nuclear build out in the US that passed the House and the Senate. Expected to be quickly signed by President Biden. Hasn't been yet, still expected to come shortly. I'm not sure if it was waiting, for the debate to go by. Either way, the question is, where are we going with nuclear? And the pushback is starting to come of what we've known. Nuclear has been in decline for decades in the US and been shut down in all of our major markets to a major degree. So why all of a sudden is it okay? So some scientists, citizens are coming out and kind of going exactly at that. I don't want nuclear near my house, because that's the question too. Where are you going to put this nuclear? And a lot of the policies of the current administration are to support lower socioeconomic areas. So then, I mean, do you put a nuclear next to a middle class family or high class family house? That's going to get some pushback there. So it's not as easy as just building these. Second of all, just restarting a nuclear plant, such as the Palisades in Michigan, that's going to cost billions of dollars and isn't going to come on until late 2025. Building a new nuclear plant takes a long time. The most recent ones to come online are Vogtle in Georgia, units 3 and 4. Those started in 2009. They only came online in 2023 and 24 after being originally expected in 2016-17, and they went 16 to 17 billion dollars over the budget. So huge expense, long time frame, not really what's impacting our client terms. So that vote did pass for the ADVANCE Act at the Senate, 88-2, and this is going to kind of string through the rest of the story, showing the divide usually that's been happening between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans have been about, I mean, many supply sources, keeping grid reliable and resilient. Democrats have been pushing for the clean and green movement to go forward, but this act kind of has nuclear in the middle. And this is a big pivot for the Biden administration. From when they started, they really wanted to categorize nuclear as something separate from clean and green. Kind of midterm, as things were falling behind, started to have some support for it. And really since the start of 2024, really getting behind nuclear. And we're just starting to see some laws and wording come out that are treating nuclear as green energy as well as categorized. So that's a big change there. Will it continue? That's the big question going forward. And as the election is upcoming, a real big part is how much of this could we need or move forward, and how will fossil fuel be treated after the election, where a Democrat likely to keep shutting down fossil fuel, where a Republican likely to use more fossil fuel, and maybe this isn't needed as much and these problems don't need to be parsed through. So we just want to make sure clients don't think this is going to solve the problems for their next term. It could be a solution for their second or third contract from the next one they sign. Taking a look at the ever-present EV story. So in news this week, just yesterday, a group of 26 Republican attorney generals headed by AG of Kentucky and West Virginia filed a lawsuit against the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration. The name of the rule is quite a mouthful, but basically it's the rule to force the building of EVs and the use of EVs in the very short term, right ahead of us over the next decade, some happening in just a couple of years. So the reason they gave was the forced transition to EVs would bypass the free market while driving up costs and undermining the reliability of the electric grid. So it's something that we've talked about, that the quicker that EVs are brought onto the roads, the higher demand is going to go quicker. Versus if things are left up to a consumer choice, likely to be much slower, and the grid will kind of be able to deal with the changes as they start to come. Also, the price of EVs, with all the tariffs being put in place from the US and the EU on Chinese EVs, driving up the prices, and the trade war and the global situations that we'll get to, making the cost of minerals and mineral processing more expensive. So this rule, if it is kept in place, expect upward pressure on prices because of an increased demand quicker. If it's repealed, we might see some of those outside years come off. And we also have the upcoming election cycle really kind of going to dictate which way we're going to go, because right now, again, the two parties are pretty far apart. And we just want to make sure that clients are aware of the inherent risks depending on which way the votes go. So that brings us to tonight's debate. So we have two very different roads regarding regulation and policy that will be going down following the next election for the president, because although a lot of laws in legislative branch, Congress, a lot of work's been done during the Biden administration using the agencies. Some of them have been tested at the Supreme Court and shot down. Others have stuck, and they've continued that strategy. So depending on which way the country goes, really is going to dictate what could impact prices. So again, political outlooks, very politically very charged topic. So just want to boil it down to be politically agnostic and really just talking about supply and demand. Is it going to increase it or decrease it? And what does that do to prices as we move forward? So kind of in a simple way, not to oversimplify it, but if a Democrat wins a presidential election, it's likely a continuation of the current green push strategy, which is shutting down fossil fuel supply, trying to build out renewable generation. And we've talked about the many issues we've had with that, with the prices and the forecast for timelines, while at the same time driving up demand. So less supply, higher demand, and that's coming through electrification measures of replacing electricity, replacing gas with electricity in buildings and forcing the use of EVs. On the other side, if a Republican wins, they're likely to slow or possibly stop all this green energy push that we've been doing. Not all of it, but really slow down or stop some of the more further left policies that have been put out there. So less demand and more supply. So likely a downward effect on prices. Question is, there's a lot of uncertainty which way we go. The other question is our reliance on China. Democrat, if we're going to continue the green push, a lot of the parts, minerals, mineral processing needed from China. We talked about last week about the G7 coming out and saying we need to find new supply chains because we're not going to be able to accomplish this and make an agreement to move forward. But that doesn't happen quickly, and they have to invest in these supply chains before they can get built. So again, for your next client terms, will that be a way out? Probably not. Probably going to still be more beholden to China for the time being. On the other hand, if Republican wins and starts leaning on the fossil fuels until we actually have the bridge to transition without causing disruptions to resiliency and reliability on the grid, we will not be as beholden to China in this kind of trade disputes that we have going on right now that hopefully doesn't evolve into an all-out trade war, which we'll get to in a second. Moving on to some global matters that all started with the attack on Israel and now is blown out into a much wider conflict in the region, and that's what we were worried about. Does this stay contained or does it start bringing in the other countries? And as we go through this, we know that Russia is on the side of Iran and hosted Hamas envoys at the palace, and we have China and Russia making stronger relationships. So this is kind of how all these stories are interwoven, and we're just saying, are things getting better or worse? What kind of hiccups could we see, or more challenges that could drive up prices for energy through supply or other types of rates? So the shipping still remains a problem, and rerouting of ships because of the attacks going on in the surrounding bodies of water. We have more countries taking sides, so that's not good when it's starting to build up instead of resolve itself. And then there's the Iran issue. Iran attacked Israel directly. U.S. sanctions them. We even threatened India for wanting to work with Iran to build a port after the fact. And then the UN censures Iran about their nuclear development, and right after they get censured, they start a plan, an actual construction to build out one of their nuclear sites even more. So this, again, the nuclear stories, and there's one for Russia too, that works against nuclear generation because people get a bad taste when nuclear goes wrong. And if any of these things pop off, a lot of that nuclear story that could be the fix might go away very quickly, just as the support disappeared when the Fukushima disaster happened in Japan. Lastly, the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah has continued to increase, and more of that's taking place in Lebanon. So it's kind of risking a Lebanon-Israel fight as well, which could blow up further into the region, a region that contains a lot of OPEC plus. So really pertaining to energy, that's how we're looking at it. And also, Iran's presidential election is tomorrow. So there's hardline and moderate, and then kind of one that kind of wants to open dialogue with the West. So tomorrow's election really could put us on a different path in that area. So something to watch out for what those results are. If it goes towards someone that's more hardliner, could be more volatile in the region with upward pressure. Someone open to more talks with the West could put some downward pressure on prices. Might be a good reason to get something locked up before the end of the weekend. Taking a look over at Russia. So the U.S., President Biden allowed for Ukraine to use weapons against Russia, and that's been a big change, kind of a mission creep where beforehand things were only supposed to be used in defense of Ukraine. And that was really a bright line for action for President Putin, which is why he sent all the warships to Cuba last week. and US is responding now by, again, a nuclear sub surfacing off Norway, kind of flex that we can do that as well. So again, anything goes wrong with nuclear, or that picture up in the middle of the biggest power plant in the area that Russia has claimed control of, again, that could spell the end of all this support for nuclear very quickly. Also, big part of this invasion that Russia has claimed is that they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO. And since then, Sweden and Finland becoming part of NATO. And now the ascension steps have just kicked off for Ukraine and Moldova to be on the path to possibly joining the EU. So not NATO, but in that area, and really could start to escalate things quickly. We haven't seen really response on these actions that have just been taken in the past couple of days, which goes into that third news line up top. I mean, the Poland and Baltics are calling for the EU to start to build a defense line on the border of Russia. So it's not just NATO making these moves. If EU starts to move against Russia more and Ukraine wants to become part of the EU, again, unfortunately, that could escalate things further. And with the energy supply situation, that's what we're concerned about. So we have Putin and Xi getting closer, and with Xi supporting them, could that impact the trade for the renewable parts we need? Then we have Ukraine attacking Russian energy sites, which the US asked them not to do, and Russia has responded in kind by attacking their energy sites. So further destabilizing the global picture that way. We also had Denmark coming out last week saying they're going to start to try to block the shadow fleet of tankers, basically the ships that aren't supposed to be transporting oil for Russia to other parts of the world. So where will that demand be filled from? So more supply possibly going out the door that way. And then moving over to China, the big story was, and we were wondering for this June, was what was going to happen with those solar waivers we've been talking about for a while, if they're going to expire, kept in place or not. And then huge tariffs came out right before it expired, and mostly pertaining to the renewable energy, right? Talking about EVs, solar cells, lithium. China's already started to take some retaliation, specifically on plastics. They're looking at pork and some other things as well. But we're just concerned about energy, and does this get better or worse? The question really is, where do we go with the EV and the changes there? Because right now China is going around campaigning to have all these recently enacted tariffs removed or reduced. They have a real focus on the EU countries right now. They're trying to get everyone, including the US, to remove them, but thinking that EU might be an easier get. Out the other side of the mouth, they're also threatening a huge trade war. And that is what we've been concerned about, because it started last August in 23. They started just stopping exports of certain materials. And in December, they stopped exporting energy materials, which was a surprise. And if they continue to do this, we could be in a really tough situation if we maintain the current path without some support from, existing generation. Not too much new for the renewable mix forecast. Solar and wind kind of still straight line, slightly increasing as we move at least into the short term there. So not jumping by 5, 10, 15% in the short term. So well behind the lofty forecast that we had out there. And again, still on the Q4 numbers, but we can see for all of our major markets, only up or down a small percentage year over year. So again, not making those huge jumps to reach the ambitious forecast of where we might be, and was part of the reason that, the financing for the IRA projecting on the savings from projects already being built. Moving over to capacity, still a strong option for our clients in ICE New England and PJM. Since the new rules have been implemented below the yellow line, we've seen the prices continue to come down for most of PJM, so good solution for most of our clients. The one area to be cautious of is DPL South, the green area, because of some transmission and generation issues they have in that region. And we do have, for now, scheduled for July 17th, the upcoming PJM capacity auction that has continued to be kicked down the road. Last year it was rescheduled a year later, just days before the auction was supposed to be held, but it does look like we are on track to move this forward. On the other hand, ICE New England, who've been doing capacity auctions like a well-oiled machine for many years, just hit their first really hiccup. They're looking to possibly redesign the entire market. So originally, we just ran the past FCA 18 in February of 24. The next one was supposed to be held February 25. That has now been pushed all the way back to February of 2028 after initially being pressed back to 26. So ICE New England, part of the reason is the extreme changes to the grid. They can't really have a good judgment call and readjustment and price discovery, what they call it, for the auction. So looking to make it more short-term and seasonal to accommodate all these changes, and if these changes are going to continue, which is still a question mark. So they're hoping to get that plan in before 2028. If not, the scheduled auction will run in February of 28. So a little wrinkle and update there. Taking a look at weather, yes, June is almost done, but just wanted to take the visual of the color change as it continues to get darker, more red and orange as we move through June to July, August, September forecast. So this was the May release of June to August, May release of July to September, getting a lot darker, and then just the most recent release in June for July, August, September. And we see the entire eastern seaboard, most of Texas getting a lot hotter, and got that really hot heat from possible droughts coming that could sweep over Texas and make it even worse. So that is standing out there. A lot of forecasts out there have top 5 hot summer. Some are calling for the top hottest summer. So those forecasts have only increased. We've had warnings from most of our RTOs of we should be okay, but August is looking a little shaky. So be aware, still time to get in, even though prices have moved up from the most of our markets being at lows mid to late February. And again, we are in El Nino moving to neutral with La Nina expected for the winter. So really could be that 1-2 punch that we really haven't seen in the past several years. So we could be in a very different price environment. And on top of this, if that gas story changes, much higher. There is a tropical development this week. Doesn't seem worth really highlighting just yet. Looks like it's going to be going through the Caribbean. We might be talking about it next Thursday. But for weather, cooling off a little bit, nice New England. No peak notifications expected, at least through the beginning of next week, kind of looking at the end of next week if that moves back up. PJM cooling off a little bit in the weekend, keeping an eye on Sunday, and then later in the week for Thursday, might be having a peak notification on July 4th or the following day. And the temperatures are getting hot in Texas, so we're worried about an energy emergency alert happening. They don't really expect anything to happen until maybe August. So if we see that in the next couple days or in July before we get to August, really could see the rest of this summer take off in next year as well. Taking a look at market data, big moves on July after kind of the spike coming off. And this is what sometimes happens right at the end of the month. So for our balance numbers, we see the fluctuation for ICE New England and PJM might be down a little bit more because again, soon your terms are going to be starting August going forward. And we saw the big drop on these bars on the July from where we saw them last week. So taking a look at balance of the year, July to December for ICE New England was off 4.5 mils week to week. Now a little bit below that 52-week average. So we popped above, and this is kind of the pattern we've seen with ERCOT first, then PJM start make these pushes, come back a little bit, move back up. So a reasonable spot to get back in there now, especially below the 52-week average. And this is the common thing with all these charts. The old highs are disappearing, so these charts are going to start looking a lot different. So taking advantage of that now, because if prices keep moving up, it's going to look like the low prices are gone. So make sure you use those in combination with the long-term chart. Take a look at Cal 25 for ICE New England off 1 mil week to week, still just above the 52-week average. Still around that average, hasn't made the pop. That's kind of the story with ICE New England compared to PJM and PJM and ERCOT. Taking a look at ICE New England gas off 2.5 cents week to week. Now a little bit closer back to the low. But again, if you draw a straight line going up from February, it's been ranging, but continuing to move up as we move forward. So taking advantage when we do have those little bit of dips. And Algonquin County are 25 off a 0.5 cent week to week, still a little closer to the 52-week average. PJM, similar story to ICE New England with July and August coming off a little bit. Really the main driver for the balance coming off. So we have PJM balance of the year, July to December off 5.5 mils week to week. So it's kind of been a rocky ride recently, jumping between the 52-week average and 52-week high. Right now, good time to get in for PJM before possibly moving back up on the next heat event, which looks like it's going to be the end of next week. Taking a look at PJM Cal 25 off 2 mils week to week, now a little bit below the 52-week average. So again, being able to buy it below 52-week average sounds a lot better than above. And taking a look at PJM gas using TETCO M3 off 1.5 cents week to week, still closer to the 52-week average. And Cal 25 PJM gas, same. So again, most all these markets, right, there's that mid to late February low, continuing to move up, ranging as we go along the way. ERCOT, on the other hand, heat getting there, seeing some high prices come out and seeing August moving back up a little bit. And taking a look at July to December, we had up 0.5 mil week to week, still close to that 52-week high. And taking a look at ERCOT calendar year 25, up 0.5 mil week to week as well, still near the 52-week high. However, still could go higher. Even when we look at the line graphs for the multi-years, it's almost around the peak of where it hit in 2022. But with what's ahead of us, it's really going to come down to how hot's it get, and does the grid get stressed out and have to issue possible EEAs that could go as far as controlled rolling blackouts. Taking a look at Houston Ship Channel for ERCOT gas, off 2 cents week to week, still a little close to that 52-week average. And calendar year 25, Houston Ship Channel off 1 cent week to week, now closer to the midpoint to the 52-week average and low. So all the markets, right, and the gas, same thing, ranges up a little bit, pulls off, but straight line, continue to make that move up. And Henry Hub, Houston Ship Channel being neighbors, pretty much same shape, and Henry Hub was off 1 cent week to week, still closer to the 52-week average. But if people don't want to lock in all their gas, they can also just lock in the basis. So the left was kind of the before times, all the way to the left of the graph, where the space between the blue and the gray is a lot bigger, compared to the right, where it's a lot closer. So you want to lock in when it's closer, or in the case of PJM, it's below, when it's usually always above for years. And then just recently, really since last summer, it's been kind of traveling below there. So that's a good time to lock in basis, if not the whole product. It could apply in ERCOT, not as hot of a product, but just so you have the PJM graph as well. That's what we're explaining. When red's below, again, this is wholesale before it's weighted for a client's load and usage in months. So they'll usually get a positive basis number, but it's going to be a lot smaller than if things turn around. And the months that matter are the winter months. So that gas story changes and we're getting a cold winter. This red line is going to jump right back above that gray. Taking a look at the outside years for ICE in New England. 25 and outer years, we're all off 1 mil to 1.5 mil this past week, with 25 about 4 mils above 2026. And this is the question, depending on how things go with the upcoming election and the other stories we have out there, getting some value in ICE in New England out of some of these future years and locking them in sooner than later. And this can be one of the most helpful graphs with a client to say, okay, when did you buy last time? This is where we are now, that's why it's higher. Or they bought during a high period and you can get them a little bit lower in here just to help walk through the wholesale prices and where the outer years are moving. This could be the top of where you call the risk, this kind of being the bottom, and that's kind of where you could apply those red and black arrows from the EIA graph that we covered in the beginning. And obviously showing a lot higher of a risk. PJM, the other store, going the other way, where the future year is getting more expensive, which they could even go higher, because over the past week, we actually saw 25 off 2 mils, outer years off around 0.5 mil to 1 mil. The coal story is still frightening them because that's the part that really could drive up, since it's usually the third biggest source of supply in the PJM territory. And if coal keeps getting shut down, how do we replace it? Is renewable going to get it there in time? Are there any retired nuclear plants that we could bring back online that will take a couple of years anyways? Taking a look at PJM, when we had that coal announcement come out the day of, we saw these prices fly up for the future years. They've settled off a little bit now with the uncertainty of where things are going, but you can see how quickly stories like that, if they're going to be in stay as rules and move forward, these things shot just as high as the peak that we saw during that fall into winter of 22. Taking a look at ERCOT going out into the future, we had 25 up a half mil. Outer years we're down a little bit. So right now we got 25, a little bit above those outside years, still a lot closer together than some of our other markets. And the question is, prices are still moving higher, getting closer to where the highs we saw before. Still a lot of summer left, a lot of heat. Just having any more problems that show up, we're going to see the prices go even higher from here. So maybe taking some of that risk off. And, it might not be too early to start bringing up the idea of a hybrid. Still a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths from what happened to people that were on an index product during Storm Uri. There have been rules changed. They might not want it for this contract, but for the next contract, if you go back and show them and the rules are in place and they've been working, it might be a great option for them to protect against the uncertainty when prices are high. Some final points to consider, kind of still mostly same outlook of managing risk of how high or low we can go from here. We have left those lows. We're kind of we're playing around the midpoint, around the average, evaluating longer terms, taking advantage of locking in those future years with these growing bullish stories. The coal story, which way it's going to go in PJM, ICE in New England, how we're going to move forward after shutting down the Mystic plants in Boston and some other stories we have covered. Being careful to explain short-term utility rates against a 12-month rate. Summer rates for ICE in New England and PJM look a lot cheaper than a 12-month rate because it doesn't include the winter months. Use those monthly bar charts to show a client so they can understand that. But if those months for the winter are lower than they usually are, which they are right now because they were triple the price they were going into winter of 2022, be a very different place, especially with the gas story changing and then the hot summer, cold winter, and then the question mark on the election. And again, all future prices, electricity and natural gas, are all up since February, electricity more dramatically than gas, but everything continues to move up, and we've had a hot into spring, hot start to summer, and we have top 5 to top 1 forecast for summer heat underway. And lastly, the whole government push to go clean and green is going to continue at least up until the election cycle, and then could even get more extreme or have the brakes pumped. So just being conscious of that and how that could impact future prices, making sure clients are aware of the risks. And then also not forgetting that the other components that go in, the renewables, being able to at least lock in that fixed adder or doing a capacity pass-through, ways to maximize the energy spends, since that can take, 35 to 50% of a client's bill.